Welcome, everybody, to the third week of TJ's College Football Vlog. Hope you had a great time watching the games from week number 2. Hope you're ready for a big week in week 3. Let's go ahead and get into Contender and Pretender. This week's contender is none other than Melvin Ingram, defensive tackle from the South Carolina Gamecocks. Maybe Melvin was just a little bit tired of hearing all the hype about freshman defensive end Jadeveon Clowney. Or maybe he was getting lost in the shuffle with other such great defensive linemen like Travian Robertson or Devin Taylor, also for South Carolina. Whatever the reason was, Mr. Ingram had a big day against Georgia this past week. Melvin had a 68-yard fake punt return for a touchdown and also recovered a fumble for a touchdown. And then, one stat that won't be recorded but shouldn't be overlooked, Melvin Ingram caught the game-winning onside kick that sealed it up for South Carolina in their 45-42 defeat of the Georgia Bulldogs. Melvin went on to win the National Defensive Player of the Week, and we salute him as this week's contender. Now, for this week's Pretender. If you haven't noticed by now, I'm really not into giving coaches or players the Pretender Award. I'm really more into calling out concepts that I feel are not satisfactory in college football, and I'm going to do that again this week. These uniform combinations that teams are coming up with. I'm going to start with Oregon. Oregon, this all started with you, and the 20 billion uniform combinations you have, all of which seem to involve the color neon. Okay, I understand that maybe it's cool, you find it fashionable, and maybe it's a selling point for your recruits. But some of these combinations are just awful. Those yellow jerseys you had this past week, are they glow in the dark? Is that the reason you brought them out? It couldn't have been because they looked good, because they did not. Then I'm going to move on to you, Georgia. Not necessarily your traditional jerseys that you used this past week. Those are fine. Let's go back to week 1 against the Broncos. Wow. Go Power Rangers, Georgia. I hope you got the Tyrannosaurus Zord, because that was always my favorite. Then we'll go to an upcoming jersey which we haven't seen yet, but we got a preview picture for this week. Ohio State. Now listen, Ohio State, there's nothing wrong with your jerseys. You've been using the same ones for years, and it's actually brought you a lot of success. So you wanted to change it up with this one? Not good. Not good at all. And finally, we have to end with talking about Maryland. Now here's the thing. Maryland's use of its state flag in its Under Armour jersey has been a polarizing issue for college football fans. Most people have come down against them, saying they look like court jesters. Okay, I'll entertain that argument. But here's the thing. That Maryland state flag is pretty cool. In fact, I would rank it as number 2 behind my own, the Palmetto flag from South Carolina. And I thought the jerseys were pretty neat. Not to mention, it helped them beat the Miami Hurricanes. Whatever your opinion is on these, some of these new uniforms are just bad. And I don't really understand the reasoning for having these. Let's look at our top 2 teams right now. Oklahoma and Alabama. One thing these schools have in common, they have boring football uniforms. The difference is the product they put on the field, as in their offense, their defense, and their special teams, that's not boring. They win a lot, and they tend to win in very exciting ways. If you really want to get people excited about your program, don't throw neon yellow into your uniforms. Just go out on the field and win. Alright, for this week's Games of the Week, we're going to start with a matchup involving number 1 Oklahoma going to Tallahassee to take on the number 5 Florida State Seminoles. Now look, we've been asking for years, is this the year that Florida State is back to the glory days of Bobby Bowden in the 90s? Maybe this is the year. But Oklahoma is going to put a bit of a speed bump in their recovery. Oklahoma is bringing in talented quarterback Landry Jones, a powerful offense, and a pretty strong defense. Florida State has all the athletes in place, and they've got an up-and-coming quarterback in E.J. Manuel, but they're just not going to have enough to match the Sooners. Look for Oklahoma to win this one in a close game. Now, we're going to travel just up the road a little bit to Gainesville, Florida for a matchup in the Swamp. Tennessee at number 18, Florida. I always look to this game because I always want to know who in the East is going to be one of the top contenders, and Tennessee versus Florida is always one of the best ways to answer that question. Now, Tennessee is looking a lot better than it did last year, and they can thank quarterback Tyler Bray a lot for that. Maybe the most talented quarterback in the SEC behind perhaps Aaron Murray from Georgia. And then Florida also on the road back to where it was. Charlie Weiss at offensive coordinator and Will Muschamp at head coach seem to have the Gators on the right track. I like Tennessee to play a good game here, but I like the home field advantage to take over, and I like Florida to win this one by about 10 or 14 points. Now, let's take a look at our hometown heroes. Number 12, South Carolina, is going to be taking on the midshipmen from the United States Naval Academy. Now, I have to put aside some biases in this one. First of all, as many of you know, I am a South Carolina fan and always have been. As many of you know as well, I am also a chaplain candidate in the United States Navy. I like to think that these two biases are canceling themselves out this week. South Carolina is coming off of a big win at Georgia. Navy is coming off of two dominant wins to begin their season. Gamecock fans, look for this one to be another uncomfortable game, but look for it to be another uncomfortable win. I think the Gamecocks figure out Navy's triple option attack in time and are able to produce enough points to keep the midshipmen at bay. Look for South Carolina to win this one fairly comfortably. Now, let's go up the road a bit to Death Valley for Clemson taking on number 21 Auburn. Now, Clemson's got some revenge factor in this one. Auburn beat them in overtime last year in an ending that was just a bit controversial. However, Clemson has looked less impressive this year, especially with a very tight win over 1AA Wofford last week. Now, Auburn. We had many questions about Auburn coming into this year. How would they replace Cam Newton? How would they replace Nick Fairley on the defensive line? Auburn's offense looks to be in good shape, especially with the help of Gus Malzahn, their offensive coordinator, but their defense looks a bit suspect. Losing a lot of starters will do that. I'm looking for Auburn to win this one, but not very comfortably, and I'm looking for a lot of points to be scored in this one. Now, my Furman Paladins are on a bit of a break this week after a strong defeat of Citadel 16-6 in Charleston. So I figured we'd look at another 1AA school that means a lot to many of us. Now, I'm assuming a lot of people watching this are either Sea Salt counselors or maybe Sea Salt campers, and so many of you are familiar with Coastal Carolina University. Well, the Chanticleers have a big matchup of their own this week. They're going to be going to Georgia to take on the Bulldogs. Now look, I heard Coach Bennett's rant too. I know he wants us all to be dogs and not cats. Whatever that means. The problem with his argument is he's trying to fire up his players, and they're running into a buzzsaw this week. Georgia is looking for a win, and they're looking to make a very big statement in this next game. And Coastal Carolina just doesn't have the talent to match up. I'm looking for Georgia to win in a blowout. Well, that's all I've got for this week. I hope everybody enjoyed the Vlog, and I hope you enjoy the games from week 3. Have a good week, everybody.